Chapter 5 Bulova Watch Time. Arde Bulova, chairman of the board, was a man who ran the company from top to bottom, ran it ragged, ran it straight uphill to success. He was a violent man, a large man, not pretty, slightly bald, with prodigious drive. He also had terrific appreciation of a big idea and was always ready to put his weight behind it. He looked like his business because he was his business. He owned and operated it. At the same time, it owned and operated him, so much so that he didn't marry until late in life. Arde worked nearly every hour of every day, worked for Bulova and nothing else. I know this because much of the time I was working with him. We used to go on weekends to Atlantic City, and there we would sit or walk up and down along the boardwalk, tossing around ideas for the company, ideas to help the business. To me, this was fascinating. We had started with Bulova when it was practically unknown. At the beginning, Bulova's chief competition was the Gruen watch company. Competition is really an exaggeration. Gruen was by far the leader of the wristwatch business in America. Bulova was just starting, but they kept eyeing each other, the champion and the contender. Every place Bulova went, from one coast to the other, they found that the jewelers of standing in each town carried Gruen watches, displayed the Gruen crest in their windows, and had no place for Bulova. Bulova tried again and again but got nowhere. They were up against a glass wall. Gruen people were gleeful. They were convinced they had effectively kept Bulova out. They even sent for Mr. Bulova and told him in so many words, "For your own good, Arde, get out of this business. You can't win against us. You'll go broke." Arde they may have called him, but they didn't know him. This was waving a red flag. It was the perfect way to keep him in the wristwatch business. But how to solve the problem? Arde Bulova remained frustrated until finally, with no place else to go, he was forced to sell to the installment jewelers. Installment jewelers had no prestige whatever at that time. They would carry Bulova watches, or anything else for that matter, and we had to be content with them. The funny thing about all this is that not through shrewdness but through circumstances, Bulova found that it soon had by far the more profitable customers. We found out that installment jewelers could sell far more watches than the so-called prestige jewelers. To appreciate the importance of this, you will have to go back with me for a moment to the time when Gruen's slogan was renowned throughout the land, "From Time Hill in Cincinnati." Renowned then, unremembered now. That, along with a magnificent picture of their building, created the impression that Gruen watches were made in America. These were the days when wristwatches first began to take hold, after the First World War. The big old-line companies sold only American-made pocket watches. They had no equipment to make small watches, and they imported no watches, or practically none, from Europe. Both Gruen and Bulova crossed the ocean for their supplies, which was one reason why they were so conscious of each other. But Gruen was still not conscious enough. Like so many successful businesses habituated to selling their own way, Gruen saw no need to alter their methods. They were satisfied that Bulova could not invade their stronghold, and as long as that held true, Bulova didn't count. They found out differently too late. Even if Gruen had wanted to sell to installment jewelers, it is true that there was more involved than just wanting to. In the first place, they would imperil the prestige of their line and bring down the wrath of their established outlets. Besides, installment jewelers needed more margin, and Gruen could hardly adopt a two-price policy. Soon the installment jewelers of America were far, far ahead of the others in volume. They kept buying and selling more watches, and all Gruen could do was stand by, riveted to their way of doing business. Gruen stayed with the jewelers who gave them prestige, while Bulova stayed with the jewelers who moved more watches. And more watches, not more prestige, paid for more advertising. We all know the story of Gruen. They went down and down until they became an inconsequential factor in the industry, while Bulova became the leader. Business is full of ironies. Recently, John Ballard, formerly president of the Bulova Watch Company, joined the Gruen Watch Company as chairman of the board. When New York City developed large dealers in watches who sold at cut prices, Bulova sold to them. They did this on the simple theory that if those jewelers sold enough watches, Bulova should sell them. Then Arde Bulova died. Whether or not his death had anything to do with what happened then, we don't know. But we do know that Bulova stopped selling to those dealers, gave up this large volume. By that time, John Ballard was with Gruen. He knew the value of this business. The moment Bulova relinquished it, Ballard grabbed it. The Gruen Watch Company, fighting to stay in business, made a handsome chunk of profit. A profit that Bulova lost. Out of that story, we come to this question. Why did the American watch companies who made pocket watches allow Gruen's growth in the beginning and allow Bulova's growth in the end? Why didn't they stop them at the start? The answer is sadly simple. Those old companies were big. They paid no attention to what the little fellow was doing until he became big enough to be dangerous. Then it was too late. You cannot protect a company with your eyes shut to what the public wants to buy. You cannot protect a company by protecting its machines or its methods. You can only protect a company by changing to what the public demands. Sounds like ABC. Yet over that ABC float the ghosts of many leaders. Here follows a telegram called The Lone Eagle. Bulova Watch Company, 392 Fifth Avenue, New York City. Gentlemen, many thanks for the Bulova Watch Prize offered to the first to make a non-stop flight from New York to Paris. The Bulova wristwatch, which it is my pleasure to wear, keeps accurate time and is a beauty. Congratulations and thanks. Signed, Charles A. Lindbergh. This telegram and letter ended a period of frustration and hope for Arde Bulova and me. We nearly missed. Arde Bulova always loved aviation, so much so that in 1936 he flew back from Europe on the airship Hindenburg, which soon after exploded and burned at Lakehurst, New Jersey. Arde was tremendously interested in Lindbergh's proposed flight. He had a feeling young Slim, as he was called then, was a winner. Arde asked me to arrange a meeting with Lindbergh so that he might do two things. Tell him of the $1,000 Bulova prize for the first non-stop solo flight to Paris, and present him with a Bulova watch. For Lindbergh to accept a Bulova prize and wear a Bulova watch would add great prestige to the company. Arde wanted it badly. He was intent on getting it. I got in touch with Lindbergh's publicity agents, and soon we were on our way to Roosevelt Field in Arde's car. It was pouring rain, and a heavy fog had settled all along the coast. What a disappointment when we got to the field. Lindbergh was asleep at the Garden City Hotel and was not to be wakened. We were told to return the next day. Maybe we didn't like driving in that downpour, but we prayed it would last until we had our chance to see Lindbergh in the morning. Well, it did rain all night, but we still didn't see him. At 7:52 a.m., in spite of intermittent rainfall, Lindbergh took off. That was May 20th, 1927. On May 21st, the newspapers and radio screamed the news. Lindbergh arrives in Paris! We were crestfallen. As though that weren't enough, we heard rumors through the grapevine that one of our competitors had already given Lindbergh a watch. Had they? Would they publicize it? Would they get the prestige we wanted for Bulova? We had waited too long, and it looked as though one of the best ideas in years had slipped through our fingers. Art had only one thing to say to me. I have to go to Switzerland tomorrow on business. The job is yours, Milton. Please don't fail me. That was Arda. Because he couldn't stay with the job, he handed it to me, and what's more, expected me to do it. I watched Lindbergh's every move. Perhaps somewhere an opportunity would arise. But as Lindbergh grew bigger and bigger, our chances appeared slimmer and slimmer. Then President Coolidge sent the USS Memphis to bring him directly to Washington. What an ideal place to give Lindbergh the award. But could we arrange it? We did. Of course, Lindbergh was surrounded by officials and welcoming crowds. He received a deluge of mail and telegrams. Nevertheless, our man managed to get through to him. Then came the climax. The Bulova Watch Company received a telegram of thanks and a letter, both signed by Charles A. Lindbergh. We made it. The next day, I looked at an exact duplicate of the watch we had given Colonel Lindbergh and christened it Lone Eagle. How could we use this watch to add to the prestige of Bulova and their jewelers? I had an idea. We would send telegrams to all jewelers handling Bulova watches offering them exact duplicates of the watch we had given Lindbergh, the Lone Eagle. We would describe the handsome satin-lined box we were using, inscribed in Colonel Lindbergh's honor and containing a facsimile of his letter. Out went the telegrams and in came the orders. By the thousands. It was magic. It was all we needed to do. According to John Ballard, then sales manager of Bulova, We sold in all over 250,000 Lone Eagle watches. Wow. Arde Bulova learned what was happening while he was abroad. When he came back to New York, he gave me a small present, a magnificent Rolls-Royce. Such are the extracurricular rewards at times in the wonderful advertising business. Arde Bulova was a fire eater. It was always hard to tell whether he was hell-bent for heaven or heaven-bent for hell. But one thing stood out clearly. Arde was big and determined, and he usually got what he wanted. One day, when he least expected it, a leading bank where he did business called and said, "Mr. Bulova, while we originally agreed to renew your note, we want to tell you now that we cannot do it." Arde was dismayed. It was the time of year when he had to have money to see him through the large number of promissory notes he always took from his customers at Christmas time. According to the bank, Bulova's certified statements were excellent. In fact, better than when the note was first discounted. Nevertheless, they had changed their minds. Banks have responsibilities to business, just as business has responsibilities to banks. Arde could not understand their change of heart. With great concern, he told me what had happened. When you are as close to your accounts as I was to mine, everything falls within your scope. I went over to the bank and spoke to the man in charge of the Bulova account. Again, he admitted the statement was fine, but refused to renew the note. I appreciate that Bulova is very sound. I know they will pay back the money, but the statement is full of red arrows, whatever that meant. I didn't know then and don't know now. And we don't want to go along. Well, when a bank doesn't want to continue, they don't want to continue. But what do? Where do you go? I sat at my desk and thought it over. On impulse, I picked up the phone and called the president of another bank, one where Bulova had no account and neither did we. I told him frankly what the trouble was, and he asked me to come over. The president, vice president, and I went over that certified statement together time and again. They could see that the Bulova business was sound and that they were entitled to what they required under normal business procedure. The next thing was to bring Arde Bulova over. I did. You could tell by Arde's face when he came out that he got what he wanted. He got what he was entitled to. Not everything worked right on the Bulova account. One of the first big ads Bulova ever ran didn't run, for example. Bulova had bought a full-color spread in the Saturday Evening Post. This had taken courage. The cost represented a large part of their annual earnings. For 6 months, their salesman had carried the ad from jeweler to jeweler and sold from it. Finally, the day came. It was Thursday. That was the day the Post hit the stands. Arde rushed out to buy a copy. He couldn't wait to see his ad. When he found it, he stood there aghast. Instead of a spread, there was one page. Half the ad. The other completely left out. Frantic, Arde phoned me. I was as frantic as he. Only a short time before this, Curtis Publishing had shown me through their magnificent plant. How they printed the Post, how perfectly each copy came out. Needless to say, a left-out page was something that never could happen. But it did happen. And of all the people in the country for it to happen to, it happened to our client. But this tale has a kite tied to it. The Post satisfied Arde. Bulova that the copy he had bought was an exception, that his spread appeared in all its splendor in the other copies of the magazine, and that such a thing couldn't possibly happen again. And Arde paid for the spread. Another promotion idea we had was also involved with a color spread in the Saturday Evening Post. This was Bulova's Christmas ad. Nothing was more important. The Post, as I have mentioned, came out on Thursday. Our Thursday would come, and our Thursday would go, and Bulova would have no way of knowing how many jewelers had seen their advertisement. Let's send the jewelers a telegram, I suggested. We had spent so much on the ad, it was worth that much more to make sure they would see it. We wired, "See pages 6 and 7 of today's Saturday Evening Post. Idea of startling importance can affect your entire business. Please read carefully and wire at once." To make it even more mysterious, we did not mention Bulova at all. An unknown member of the company signed the message. Out went that wire to jewelers across the country. In came many answers. Here's one typical response. It is all right to send out wires about your business. But why wake me up at 4 in the morning and get me so excited that I dressed and went out to find some place open that would sell me the Saturday Evening Post? From this, we learned a moral. When you want to send a telegram, don't. Send a day letter instead. What plus difference did we find for Bulova watches? How could we demonstrate any difference between Bulova and other watches? Your product couldn't say 12 o'clock sooner than any other watch just because you charged more. 12 was 12 by anybody's watch that kept time. We decided to buy little fragments of time to advertise. We chose radio and we created the first time signals. But when you went on the air with 12 o'clock, Bulova, Bulova watch time, it looked as though you had left plus difference behind. The fact is you hadn't. When radio stations and later television stations told listeners day in and day out that it was 12 o'clock, Bulova watch time, the implication was clear. Here, where time had to be right on the dot, Bulova was the standard of time. If radio and television stations depended on Bulova watches to time their split-second schedules, surely you, the listener, could depend on them too. When we first started buying time signals, I doubt if any of us realized their full significance. The time signals then seemed simply reminders of the Bulova name, supplements to the printed ads. But as time went on, it became clear that the inference drawn from the signals was stronger than any words. Now we turned the tables. We kept adding more and more time signals until we spent some $6 million a year on time signals alone. Print advertising became a supplement to the time signals. We used print ads largely as catalogs to show the styles you could choose among the Bulova watches, which Bulova, Bulova watch time, had already made you want to buy. Later, when we added TV, we were able to combine watch styles with time signals. But long before that happened, Bulova had become by far the leader in the watch field. With time signals, another advantage accrued to Bulova by force of circumstance. The only way to buy and keep prime time for signals was to contract for them all year round. We had to become, in spite of ourselves, consistent all-year-round advertisers. Seasonal considerations had to be abandoned. By and large, Bulova was spending as much money on advertising right after Christmas as before. Think of this now, because it changed a custom deeply ingrained in advertising. Normally, advertisers spend their money at the time the consumer spends his. That seems the best way to make advertising pay. But the time signals forced us to change all this. Of course, when Christmas came, we sold more than we did in January. But we sold to people who had heard of Bulova all year round and wanted those watches. The time signals not only helped us at Christmas, they helped us sell more watches all through the year. It's interesting to know that we started the time signals with $50,000, and, as I mentioned before, wound up investing well over 120 times that amount. An idea for Bulova came to me one day, and we sold it to most of the stations not only for Christmas, but for New Year's as well. Imagine this at Christmas time. It is midnight. The bells of Christmas peal from your radio. Then a pleasant, clear voice comes in and says, "Merry Christmas to you from Bulova. To you who received a Bulova watch this Christmas go, our congratulations. The one who loves you most has given you the best." This message went into millions of homes carrying Christmas cheer and Bulova prestige. Anyone who had received a Bulova was happy. Anyone who hadn't wanted one. That Christmas message, and a similar one at New Year's, was, with rare exceptions, complimentary from the stations, part of their Merry Christmas to Bulova. Periodically, other ideas would miss. In 1930, a project developed which was made to order for me. Also by me. First, it involved showmanship. Second, it had never been done before. I was in my element. It was to be a national radio program. But instead of having one single sponsor, we would sell the program to one Bulova jeweler in each city on the Columbia Broadcasting System. 20 cities in all. Each jeweler was to have his own local commercial. He would be the sponsor of a great national program. Quite a coup for a local jeweler, and all it would cost him would be his pro rata share of the time and talent. We planned one of the finest shows on the air, featuring Guy Lombardo and his orchestra, with a nationally famous guest star every week. The pièce de résistance would be a transatlantic broadcast, a novelty then, starring Dr. Hendrik Willem van Loon, author of the best-selling Story of Mankind, and then at the height of his popularity. Dr. Van Loon would talk to us directly from Holland, the Diamond Center. Diamonds. What could be better for a jeweler? That special broadcast above all else enticed them. It really helped sell the jewelers the whole 13 weeks, ending at Christmas time. A fine idea, but there was still quite a way to go. Columbia had not yet said they would permit us to have a different commercial on each station, each jeweler talking to his own city. We hadn't approached Dr. Van Loon. We hadn't even met him. Maybe he wouldn't do it, and if he would, how much would he want? The first thing I did was to call on CBS. After hearing the idea, Bill Paley, then president, said, "If the stations will do it, it's okay with me. Only I don't know why you should spend so much time selling all those separate jewelers when you could sell the whole program to one sponsor." I knew why. It would be good for Bulova. The jewelers would be advertising Bulova watches and paying the cost to boot. The next thing I did was to ask Dr. Van Loon to visit us. He had been introduced to me by a friend, so I could talk to him about the broadcast. He came to my office in a building on Fifth Avenue. Because I had been detained, my secretary courteously suggested, "Doctor, would you like to look out the window at the view of New York while you're waiting?" He startled the girl by answering, "Young lady, I hate the goddamn town." That was that. When I arrived, I told him what I wanted, a broadcast directly from Holland and a talk to all America about diamonds. Dr. Van Loon liked the idea, but not the hour. It would be 3 o'clock in the morning in Holland, but finally he agreed. Then the question, as always, "What will you pay me for this broadcast?" I had $3,000 set aside. I planned to offer him $2,000 and hold the rest in abeyance to give him if he fought hard. I said to him quite firmly, "We will pay you $2,000, and waited for him to refuse. Dr. Van Loon looked annoyed. "Mr. Biow," he said, "you're just like all other American businessmen. You have no idea of value. You do everything extravagantly. Such a thing isn't worth $2,000. But he took it. Now came the matter of selling the jewelers. For this I crossed the country by train and plane. It was a grueling job. If we missed one, it would spoil the deal. We had to buy the whole basic network or none. "This is one of the greatest bits of showmanship ever created for jewelers," I explained to them. Dr. Van Loon, speaking across the ocean, from the Diamond Center, for you who deal in diamonds. Finally, I sold them all. Now we were ready to go. Our show, called the Radio Follies, had all the pep and sparkle of Follies needed. Back of it was Lombardo's sweet music, and each week another great star such as Eddie Cantor, Belle Baker, George Jessel, or the act of Weber and Fields was on. The best. Jack Benny, if I remember right, starred on the first show. He did a brilliant bit of comedy. I remember driving him home that night. He said to me, "You know, there's something about radio that I like. I haven't quite figured out how or where, but some way I hope to find my place in it." Then, the show featuring Dr. Van Loon. At 10:15 on cue, the orchestra came to a full stop. The announcer said, "Ladies and gentlemen, from across the Atlantic, we now bring you the voice of Dr. Hendrik Willem van Loon, direct from Amsterdam, Holland." We stood by and waited, and waited, and waited, and then weird noises, nothing else. But we were on the air, and the man in charge signaled the orchestra to start playing again. What a letdown for the jewelers all over the country. What a letdown for me. I had to collect money from all those jewelers. The mail from the jewelers sizzled. Their piece de resistance had wound up in ashes. What they bought, they did not get. We had to work skillfully then to get our money. In justice to the jewelers, every one of them paid, in spite of their disappointment. In toto, the Radio Follies was a big success, and for the jewelers too. Imagine local jewelers sponsoring a great national program, starring the most important personalities in the entertainment world. The broadcast not only moved goods, they lifted the sponsoring jewelers to a place of major importance in their cities. They got their money's worth, and Bulova got national advertising at no cost to them. Some time ago, the Benrus watch company threatened to sue Bulova, the major television stations, their representatives, and the Biow company for $9 million. Benrus complained that we monopolized the prime spots on the majority of stations. Wherever they went to buy time, they got one answer. Bulova has the best time, with 1 hour protection on each side of it. Benrus called in Judge Joseph M. Proskauer and his associate, Norman S. Goots, to handle the suit. After consideration, they refused. Then Benrus sent for Alfred L. Rose, their Washington attorney. He said he would handle the case, but it would cost them some $300,000 and he wasn't sure they would win it. Here's the whole story. Whenever a new station got a license, we always sent it a Bulova contract. We put no price on it. We simply said, because you have a new station, here are our congratulations and a Bulova contract for 28 announcements a week. Put them on between 8 and 10 o'clock each night. Charge card rate for 20 seconds and 1/2 less for 10-second announcements. We couldn't lose much on a deal like that. If we didn't like the price, we simply stopped. If we did like it, we had a contract. That's all there was to our monopoly. Of course, Benrus didn't proceed with the case because they had no case. The 10-second spot on television was a great idea for Bulova time signals. It was a Biow company innovation, originated by Terry Klein, one of our vice presidents. TV stations had been splitting the 30-second interval between programs into 2 segments, a 20-second commercial and a 10-second station identification. Terry figured if you could get them to sell those 10 seconds for a time signal, which included their call letters, they would make money, Bulova would profit, and the public would be served. Our idea was to center a Bulova dial on the screen with the station call letters in the upper left corner. The announcer would say, America runs on Bulova time, 9 p.m., Bulova, Bulova watch time. Then, in the last 2 seconds, he'd give the station identification. Terry proposed the idea to NBC. They promptly turned it down. They said, this is NBC time and nobody can buy it. I took Terry with me to tell the story to Dr. Frank Stanton, president of CBS, at lunch. Within 24 hours, Stanton okayed it. 6 months later, NBC followed suit. Now the 10-second spot is nationwide. R.D. Bulova, chairman of the board, had a dynamic president in John Ballard. He started as an office boy with a gift of natural shrewdness that took him right to the top. John Ballard had a natural penchant for selling. He worked as a salesman on the road for years before he became sales manager. John's outlook was so down to earth, so basic, that when he was sales manager, he always kept part of the trade for himself. He would still go out to Detroit to sell so that he could keep close to the feel of things. In fact, even when John became president, he never really gave up sales management. John Ballard had a natural penchant for selling. He worked as a salesman on the road for years before he became sales manager. John's outlook was so down to earth, so basic, that when he was sales manager, he always kept part of the trade for himself. He would still go out to Detroit to sell so that he could keep close to the feel of things. In fact, even when John became president, he never really gave up sales management. John did not agree. That was all right. He was entitled to his opinion. But one thing is certain. Except for Ard Bulova, John Ballard was by far the best man in the Bulova Watch Company. After Arda died, John left Bulova and joined the Gruen Watch Company, as I have said, where he is now chairman of the board. I doubt whether Bulova has found anybody since who is equal to him in ability. Bulova grew, and so did their advertising, until they passed in rapid succession Waltham, Hamilton, Elgin, and all the rest. As a matter of fact, their volume became so great that they spent for advertising at that time more than all the other watch companies put together. I was driving down Broadway the other day and saw a sign in a jewelry repair shop window that said, Tiny Watch Repair. An idea struck me. An idea for Bulova. I no longer had the account. I was no longer in the business. But suppose they said, Bulova, world's leading watch except in repair shops. What a powerful ad that could be. The Bulova ads that are running right now? Their caption reads, Accutron. Somewhere off in the background is the name Bulova. Dear old Bulova, there she goes, almost out of the ad. A new watch is coming out. Almost forgotten is the tremendous value built over the years by spending millions of dollars on the simple letters Bulova. All good things must end. After leaving the Biow company, Bulova stopped using time signals, and when they stopped, their volume began to slip. Just as with Johnny's call for Philip Morris, Bulova's time signals were a valuable asset, the most memorable single element of their advertising. Even today, if you ask the man on the street, what do you think of when you think of Bulova watches? The answer is invariably Bulova watch time, although it has been a long time since anyone has heard it, except in his memory. That's it for today. If you enjoyed this video, you might want to check our link in the description, where you'll find many other fundamental marketing books in different languages. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more persuasion and direct response content. See you in the next one.